Professor Horst Hutter from Concordia University will be discussing erotic regimes from Antiquity to Nietzsche.
My discourse now will not be about the fact that some political regimes are erotic. That is not what I mean, but that there is a regime, a governance for eros, erotic contacts among human beings in any society, which is largely defined by the forms of religiosity that dominate a given society. I will begin this by quoting aphorism 168 from Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil, a rather late and very important work of his. And there he says, Christianity gave Eros poison to drink. To be sure, he did not die from it, but he degenerated into a vice. Now, what does this mean? What I'm going to say will have to do now with this issue. Now, there is a profound difference between erotic regimes in antiquity before the rise of Christianity, and then what happened to it to the rise of Christianity. We may begin by reflecting on the fact that the word eros does not exist in any text of the Gospels, in any one of the Christian texts of early Christianity. It is as if the word had disappeared from the Greek language, which we know it has not. In order to elucidate this, I'd like to refer to St. Paul's letter, St. Paul being the founder of Christianity. I'd like to refer to St. Paul's letter to the Corinthians, with its famous passage, love is gentle, love is kind, which is very frequently cited in Christian weddings. Now, the word for love that St. Paul uses is one of the four words for love that the Greek language knew, agape. The other three words are eros, storge, and philia. Philia and storge are used in the New Testament Greek, but eros is not. Now, in this letter to the Corinthians, it's a letter addressed to the early Christian community that had been formed in Corinth on the basis of the Christian teachings. And this Christian community was in a habit of sending its young girls and its young boys to the Venus temple, to the Aphrodite temple, where they were taught how to make love. The idea was that young girls would know then how to pleasure a man, and the man would go there in order to find a bride in the Aphrodite temple. This was the practice of antiquity, of the pagan societies of antiquity. It may be compared, for example, what we know from ancient China in Robert van Gulik's famous book, Sexual Life in Ancient China, which was very similar. Now, this was profoundly changed. So what St. Paul is saying is criticizing the Christian community in Corinth and saying what you are doing is not love, it's not agape, but he doesn't mention eros, right? So he is exhorting the Christian community not to practice this anymore. So then what happens afterwards is that a profound attack, a Manichaean and Gnostic attack in the development of the Christian cults on erotic activity. This results, for example, in the monogamous marriage, which is the erotic regime of Christianity, which is similar to the erotic regime of Islam, and probably also of Judaism, of the monotheistic religiosities. And the erotic regime is both parties stay virginal until the wedding night, and then it's entirely governed by one partner all one's life, right? Until death do us part. The problem, however, with Eros is that it is a daimonic force in us that makes itself felt even against any kind of attempt to suppress it. Eros cannot be suppressed. There's a famous quote from the Sophocles' play of Antigone, which says, Eros cannot be conquered in fight. And the idea is that Eros is a daimonic force which shows itself. Of course, it is possible to have a marriage based on philia and agape. As a matter of fact, this is the best that would be possible, that should be applied. The best thing would be an erotic attraction based in philia, friendship, and in agape, in kindness and consideration towards the partner. That, of course, nobody would doubt that. But it also has to include erotic activity. And the problem with erotic activity that it shows it cannot be suppressed. Hence, for example, the commandment, fifth commandment of the Jewish faith, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, is simply not possible. There's no way that anyone can avoid coveting. And a rabbi once told me that, jokingly of course, a student of mine, that thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife means that you can covet a woman if she's no neighbor's wife. If she's just another one. So coveting comes when Eros, the daimon, decides to come, not when I want or when a particular regime decides that I should or should not covet. So the question then becomes how to deal with this force. It has to be dealt with. It is not possible to have erotic contact with everyone that one covets. As a matter of fact, the implications are vast in terms of conflict, jealousy, and all the destruction, the rages that arise as destructive forces. So something has to be done. And now, to my mind, the best solution lies in the Platonic understanding of Eros, as it is formulated in the dialogue in the Symposium. Now, the Symposium is characterized by 7 speeches, and the first 3 speeches deal with the favorite erotic activity of ancient Greece by Deacon Eros, the love of young boys, by somebody who is appointed by the father to take care of the erotic education of a young boy, 15 or 16 years old, and teach him what he should look for, etc. And by Deacon Eros, but it of course also was, it degenerated into erotic contact with the young boys, which it wasn't meant for as in terms of its erotic regime. Now, in the 4th speech, a very significant speech of Aristophanes, the comic poet, the great comic poet of Aristophanes, he described his vision of Eros. As it's very significant to remark on the fact that he was meant to speak as the 3rd speaker in the Symposium, but he has hiccups from his drinking the night before, so he can't speak, and so his speech is postponed as to the 4th speech, which is significant in terms of the overall arrangement of the Symposium. 7 speeches, and the 4th speech is central. So the 4th speech deals with erotic attraction in general. And what Aristophanes does, it recounts a myth Says in late antiquity, in ancient times, human beings were not what they are now. They were double, they were round, and they had two faces looking in different directions, and they had one big belly, and they were of either male gender, female gender, but the majority were male-female gender. Then they became uppity to the gods in Olympus, and Zeus decided then to kill them all, but then he had a conference with the other gods, with the other divinities, both male and female, and they counseled him and said, well, if you do that, you lose all sacrifices from these uppity round creatures, from these whole bell human beings. Why not rather split them in two? Then you get more sacrifices, you do not, so that's what Zeus decides to do. He cuts them in two, and then Eros, erotic attraction, becomes the search for one's lost half. A very beautiful image. And but there are, of some of the lost halves, some females look for their lost halves because they were double female, look for their lost halves in women, and some men, because they were double men, look for their lost halves in other men, but the majority look for their lost halves in the opposite gender. Now this, of course, then means that there is nothing wrong with gay, what is today called gay sex, that it is something that is inborn in some, but in the majority it is not. So that's a very beautiful speech, but that, of course, even if one has found most human beings search for their lost halves and expend a lot of energy in so doing, perform a lot of silly sacrifices to the divine, and most of them never find their lost halves. But they produce children in the search for the lost halves. And this is, of course, good for Zeus because he gets more sacrifices. So the vision of the human condition is we are all, so to speak, sacrificial animals that are born to search and suffer, to reproduce, and then to die. Now, but this does not, so the vision of it does explain a good arrangement for the erotic regime in a particular society, right? To encourage the finding of one's lost halves. And that, of course, may be, that's why they had these temples in which they taught young girls and young boys how to make love. And the boys and the girls would find each other there and have preferences for this rather than for that. Right? So that then is one of the forms of the erotic regime of antiquity. They had temples like this all over pagan antiquity, also in ancient China. But this still doesn't solve the problem of the erotic daimon, the daimonic force that drives us there. And that is when then the next speech, the Socrates speech, comes in. Because Socrates then, who says he was instructed by a woman, a priestess, Diotima, the beloved of God, and she taught him about Eros, and she taught him that Eros is the mortal creature's desire to attain immortality by begetting upon the beautiful. Begetting upon the ugly is not possible. One can only beget upon the beautiful. But then begetting is not just begetting of children. That is one form of attaining immortality, but is certainly not the only one. The other forms of attaining immortality is by creating cultural works of great value, poetry. Then there's a big discussion about poiesis, about poetry, which is defined as a bringing of something from not being into being. So the fundamental guidance of erotic activity, of the daimonic force, would then be in the production of works of culture and works of art, right? Poetry, writings, etc. Right? And that is then the Socratic vision, the Platonic vision, if we may so assume. Plato himself, apparently, the writer Plato, as far as we know, was what we today would call gay. He had a lover called Dion, the son of the tyrant of Syracuse, and whom he tried to influence to moderate the tyrannical force of the government of Syracuse. But Plato himself was gay and was searching for his lost half in other men. Now, well, as far as we know, Socrates was married twice, had children, and was not gay, even though he had many proposals by young men who were gay and who wanted to cuddle with him. Now, the vision then of Socrates is then, I think, but this is completely suppressed in the Christian disposition, in the Christian erotic regime, unless we sort of think of the illegal forms of gay sex that occur in the priesthood of modern times, up to modern times. Right? Now, we have, of course, similar erotic regimes, similar problems with eros in Islam, no different. Right? I mean, the fact is that it has to be regulated. There's no way around it. It cannot be simply left uneducated, unregulated. Also, there's something very positive in trying to be the guide of one's own daimon in such a way as to create oneself by creating. So self-creation would be one of the ways that, as Professor Addo has pointed out, on the basis of his analysis of the figure of Socrates in the symposium, that what Socrates advocates is a form of spiritual exercise, a form of spiritual self-creation, thereby. The erotic desire is the guide to that. That is, somebody falls in love, finds someone attractive, and then uses that desire for that person to create something that is of beauty. And that is then the vision of the Platonic vision. But that is not possible in the Christianity except as a sin. So that's why Nietzsche is saying Christianity has given Eros poison to drink. He did not die from it. It degenerated into a vice. So,
well, thank you very much, Professor Hutter. Join us next time for the second episode.
Exactly.
Thank you.